Well, things just continue to be more and more fascinating around the world. I've got a list of articles, 20-some articles, that I would love to go through every one of them with you today. Of course, we will not have time for that. Nevertheless, there are a couple of things that we simply must talk about. Before we get to our main topic today, I thought it was so interesting that Senator Rand Paul said on Friday that he's filing a class action lawsuit against the Obama administration over the National Security Agency's far-reaching data collection policies. In an interview on Fox News, the Kentucky Republican said he started the effort aiming it to apply to millions of people to say, no, you can't have our records without our permission. Now, this is interesting because this government, as well as the Bush government before it, continues to be impudent and to collect all of our phone records, whether we like it or not. Now, you may immediately say, well, what's the matter with that? Well, what I'd like to do is give you a little bit more of what Senator Paul has to say, and then I want to read to you the text of the Fourth Amendment of our Constitution designed to limit the power of government. So Senator Paul said, we want to overwhelm the government. We object to the government looking at our records without our permission. The government should only look at that metadata with a warrant, he argued. We're hoping to take it all the way to the Supreme Court, he told Fox News. We want them to protect the Fourth Amendment, to protect the right of privacy. We think we can have security, defend ourselves against terrorism without giving up our privacy. Paul also criticized Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, who testified no collection of Americans' data was done intentionally, saying, Paul said lying to Congress is a felony. Clapper testified that no collection of Americans' data was done intentionally, and yet a few days later, he said, I wasn't totally candid when I said that. In other words, I lied. And Senator Paul is reminding us that lying to Congress is a felony. Of course, President Clinton also lied to Congress about his relationship with Monica Lewinsky, and somehow he got by with that. Nevertheless, that's part of what's going on today. There's a big battle over whether our Constitution means anything or not. Now, let's go back to the Fourth Amendment, and I want you to listen to it word for word. This is the text of the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution of the United States of America. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Okay, now let's just pause there for a moment, because I know sometimes we read these legal phrases and they don't totally sink in. So let me go over that portion again before we go to the last half of the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated. Now, the next question that arises, of course, is, what is an unreasonable search and seizure? And how does the government propose to protect us from unreasonable searches and seizures? Well, the second half of the Fourth Amendment tells us the answer. And no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause supported by an oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. In other words, you cannot search a person's private effects, their papers, their homes, without a warrant. And a warrant shall not be issued unless probable cause is supported by an oath or affirmation before a judge. So our forefathers went to great lengths to protect our liberties against the encroachment of government. Now, they understood the encroachment of government very well because they had just fled a government that tended to encroach upon every aspect of their lives. They had just fled from Great Britain. They came here to the United States to breathe the fresh air of freedom. Well, that was way back in 1776. Now, here we are. Time has whittled away at our freedoms, and now Senator Paul feels it's necessary to file a class action suit against the Obama government because they are totally ignoring the Fourth Amendment. So if a government, you have a constitution, but they pay no attention to it and nobody enforces it, what are the people to do? Well, you've got to have someone like Senator Rand Paul come along and say, all right, we're going to sue the government. And we're going to make such a big deal about this, and we're going to make the price so high that they will not be able to ignore this. This will end up in the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will be forced to rule whether this government is systematically violating the Constitution of the United States or not. Now, it's obvious they are, because they're collecting all the phone records of everybody that makes phone calls here in the United States of America. I mean, they're just gulping them up, harvesting them, putting them on databases, storage units somewhere, and then they can go get them at will. Now, that's what's going on right now. Your phone records, my phone records, your emails, my emails, your web searches, my web searches. You hear what I'm saying to you? That's what your government, the Obama administration, is doing right now. Now, the Bush administration did it before the Obama administration. President Obama, before he became President Obama, was against this, he claimed. But all of a sudden, once he's in the seat of power, he enjoys having the power to look at your phone records, to read your emails. He enjoys that right. You know, recently, Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, castigated Obama, saying, you listen to my cell phone calls. And she just climbed all over him. She said, you are worse than the East German Stasi, which was the secret service under communist East Germany. She said, you're worse than that. Okay, now, Americans, please turn away from that television set for just a moment. Stop a minute. Think. We're on the brink of losing everything our forefathers fought for. And if we're not careful, we'll lose it through doing nothing. We just have plenty of things to do. We're comfortable. We've got a nice television set. Got our favorite programs. Got food on the table. That's all we need. Let's not get in protracted battles about this thing called the Fourth Amendment or privacy. Now, we can do that, but government never gets enough. Government, by its nature, is a beast. And the bigger the beast gets, the bigger its appetite gets, until finally they will penetrate in every area of our life. Now, if you don't believe that's going to happen, the Bible specifically says it is going to happen. The Bible teaches a time when every person will have to have a mark or a number without which you will be unable to buy or sell. Well, we're almost there. There's a law in Congress already passed by the Senate, still laying in the House of Representatives, that will require every single one of us to have a national ID card with our own personal ID number, and without that, you do not hold a job in America. Now, what's the matter with that? Well, that's okay. Well, let's go to the next step then. So a time will come when we no longer like tolerating all of this freedom of the press, freedom of speech, freedom of dissent. Now we feel like We've got to whip everybody into some form of the global man, the personage of the New World Order, however you want to describe this person. And so we say, okay, now you're going to have to take a pledge of allegiance to the government. We've just had a horrible war that's killed 2 billion people, which the Bible prophesies is coming. We've just had this terrible war. We can no longer allow religious dissent, religious criticism. We can no longer allow dissent from the government. We're going to force you to take a pledge of allegiance. You're going to have to say, I agree with this. I affirm, what are we going to call this thing? I'll think of it in a minute, but it's going to be some kind of a global ethic. That's what we'll call it. We'll say this is the global ethic. This is the ethical way for a human being to act. And anyone that will not ascribe to this, we will rule they are unethical and they are a threat to peace on earth. They're a threat to the New World Order because all this dissent got us World War III, which got us 2 billion dead. Now, none of that's going to be true, but that's going to be the propaganda which the public media will stand up and sing in full harmony. Okay. Now, but it's coming because the Bible says it will. The Bible says you will be forced to worship the world government beast. And when we say worship, we don't necessarily mean that you get on your hands and knees and bow your head to the ground. We may merely mean that you sign a loyalty oath. And you say, well, how are they going to make me do that? Well, the Bible says exactly how they're going to make you do it. You're already going to have this number that you need in order to buy or sell this national ID. By then it may even be called a global ID. You're already going to have it. But it has to be renewed. And they're going to say in order to renew your number, to validate your number, you have got to pledge allegiance to the New World Order, the one world government, however they address it. And if you refuse to take that pledge of allegiance, then your number will not be validated, which means you cannot hold your job, which means you cannot have a bank account, which means you have been boycotted by society. You say, is that going to happen? Absolutely. It is going to happen. There may be a few pockets of resistance in the world that don't go along, but the Bible teaches that most of the world is actually going to participate in this program. You've heard about it. In the Bible, it's called the Mark of the Beast.